Behind the masks of Hollywood's most terrifying killers lies a darker truth. Real evil doesn't hide. It gains your trust. They looked like ordinary places, a quiet farmhouse, a family home, a college town. But behind their doors unfolded horrors so brutal, they reshaped the way we imagine evil. Tonight, 3 crimes reveal how reality can outdo even the darkest fiction. The first piece of this dark puzzle doesn't begin on the silver screen. It comes from a lonely farm in Wisconsin, with a man whose crimes rewrote the language of horror itself.
He lived on a quiet Wisconsin farm, but what police discovered inside his house was the stuff of nightmares. His crimes didn't just shock America, they changed horror films forever. This is the story of Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield. Ed Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. His childhood was far from ordinary. His father, George Gein, was a violent alcoholic, unable to hold steady work. But it was his mother, Augusta, who left the deepest imprint on Ed's mind. Augusta was fanatically religious, strict, controlling, and filled with hatred toward the world. She preached to Ed and his brother Henry that women, except for herself, were instruments of sin and corruption. She read passages from the Old Testament that focused on the punishment of the wicked, reinforcing in young Ed that the world was filled with evil, and only obedience to her could keep him safe. The Gein children were not allowed friends. School was permitted, but after class they were forced straight home. Social interaction, especially with girls, was forbidden. Augusta's goal was simple: complete control over her son's mind. For Ed, this isolation was devastating. He was often bullied in school, shy, small, effeminate in mannerisms. Teachers noted he would sometimes laugh to himself randomly, as though hearing voices no one else could. By the time Ed was a teenager, he lived in a private reality, one shaped almost entirely by his mother's teachings. Ed's father died in 1940, leaving him, Henry, and Augusta alone on the farm. Without George's drinking to contend with, Augusta tightened her control even further. In 1944, tragedy struck. Henry, Ed's older brother, died in what was officially described as an accident. The two had been burning brush on the farm when the fire spread. Authorities found Henry's body lying face down, bruised. The cause was said to be asphyxiation from smoke. Investigators noted something strange. Henry's head showed signs of blunt trauma. No charges were filed. Ed was never suspected, but some would later wonder, did Ed kill his brother to remove the only obstacle between himself and his mother? 2 years later, in 1945, Augusta herself died after a series of strokes. For most people, losing a parent is tragic. For Ed, it was the unraveling of his entire world. He was 39 years old, but emotionally stunted, socially crippled, and utterly alone. His home became a tomb. He sealed off his mother's bedroom, keeping it pristine as a shrine, while the rest of the house deteriorated into filth. He read pulp magazines obsessively, stories of headhunters, Nazi atrocities, cannibalism, and anatomical medical texts. Slowly, Ed slipped into madness. After Augusta's death, Ed began visiting local cemeteries at night. He would slip into graveyards, sometimes trance-like, and dig up freshly buried bodies, mostly middle-aged women resembling his mother. He brought them home, dissected them, and kept parts as trophies. Police later discovered bowls made from human skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, and a belt made of nipples. Ed's obsession didn't stop at collecting. He began fashioning a woman's suit stitched from corpses, believing that wearing it would let him become his mother. This detail, more than any other, marked Ed Gein as the stuff of nightmares. Though grave robbing sustained his urges for years, eventually it wasn't enough. On December 8, 1954, local tavern owner Mary Hogan disappeared. Her tavern showed blood on the floor, but her body was never found. Suspicion never fell on Ed. Then, on November 16, 1957, Bernice Warden, a hardware store owner, went missing. The cash register was open. A trail of blood led out the door. Witnesses recalled Ed had been there that morning. Police went to question him at his farmhouse. What they found inside would shock the nation. The house was filled with human remains crafted into household objects. Bowls from skulls, chairs upholstered in human skin, lampshades stitched from faces, a box of preserved vulvas, a belt decorated with nipples, and masks with hair still attached. In a shed, the body of Bernice Warden was found decapitated, hung upside down like a deer. She had been shot and gutted. Plainfield was stunned. Ed, once a friendly handyman, had become the embodiment of horror. Ed was arrested and confessed almost immediately. He admitted to killing Mary Hogan and Bernice Warden and to exhuming corpses. At trial, his mental state was questioned. Diagnosed with schizophrenia and psychosis, Ed was deemed unfit for trial and committed to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. In 1968, he was found competent to stand trial. Despite his insanity plea, he was found guilty but legally insane and returned to psychiatric care. He spent the rest of his life in mental institutions, reportedly a model patient. Quiet, polite, and cooperative. He died in 1984 at age 77 of respiratory failure. Ed Gein's crimes might have remained a dark local legend, if not for their impact on cinema. Psycho, 1960. Norman Bates, obsessed with his dead mother, inspired by Gein. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Leatherface, wearing human skin masks. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Buffalo Bill, who skinned women to make a suit. These films created the archetype of the deranged, isolated killer. Ed Gein became the bridge between real crime and pop culture nightmares. The Butcher of Plainfield never set out to inspire Hollywood, but his nightmarish acts continue to haunt the silver screen decades later. From Norman Bates to Leatherface to Buffalo Bill, each owes their terror to a lonely man on a Wisconsin farm. Ed Gein reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not found in haunted houses or supernatural myths, but living quietly among us, waiting for the night to fall. As shocking as that might have been, the next case is even harder to believe.
If Ed Gein's crime showed how isolation and obsession can twist a mind into monstrosity, the next story proves that horror can strike even in the most ordinary family home. Long Island, New York, a place of suburban dreams, would soon host a massacre so cold it would haunt the world for decades.
The Amityville Murders, the House of Horror. A quiet suburban home on Long Island, a family massacre, and a haunting that terrified the world. The Amityville murders weren't just a true crime tragedy. They became one of the most infamous paranormal cases in American history, inspiring books, movies, and endless debates about whether evil can linger long after death. In the early 1970s, Ronald DeFeo Sr. and his wife Louise lived at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The large Dutch colonial home stood proudly by the canal with its signature quarter-moon windows. From the outside, it looked like suburban success. The DeFeos had 5 children: Ronald Jr., Butch, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John. But behind the perfect image, the family was troubled. Ronald Sr. was strict, short-tempered, and often abusive. His son Butch bore the brunt of his anger. By his late teens, Butch was using heroin, LSD, and alcohol, heavily spiraling into paranoia and violence. Friends described him as armed, unstable, and threatening even toward his father. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. In the early hours of November 13th, 1974, at around 3:15 a.m., Butch DeFeo armed himself with a .35 caliber rifle and murdered his entire family as they slept. His parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, his brothers Mark and John, his sisters Allison and Dawn. All 6 were found face down in bed. Strangely, there were no signs of struggle. Neighbors heard no gunshots. Even the family dog stayed eerily silent. The massacre stunned Amityville. How could a son execute his family with such cold precision? Later that morning, Butch ran into a local bar, claiming his parents had been shot. Friends followed him home and discovered the grisly scene. At first, Butch posed as a shocked survivor. But under questioning, his story collapsed. Within 24 hours, he confessed, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop." In 1975, he was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. Yet one mystery lingered. How could 6 gunshots echo in a quiet neighborhood without anyone hearing? Some blamed drugs. Others whispered of darker forces. A year later, the Lutz family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue. George and Kathy Lutz, with Kathy's 3 children, thought the house was a bargain. But soon, strange events began. George woke every night at 3:15, the time of the murders. Cold spots, foul odors, and swarms of flies appeared in winter. Kathy claimed invisible hands touched her, and her face sometimes aged into that of an old woman. Their daughter befriended an unseen pig-like creature named Jody, with glowing red eyes. A priest who came to bless the house heard a deep voice command, "Get out." After just 28 days, the family fled, leaving everything behind. Their story became The Amityville Horror, 1977, a best-selling book marketed as a true story. 2 years later, Hollywood adapted it into a box office hit. But skeptics weren't convinced. Neighbors heard nothing unusual. Cold spots could be explained by drafty windows. The priest later denied key details. Some accused the Lutz family of fabricating the haunting for profit, possibly cooked up with their lawyer. Meanwhile, Butch DeFeo himself gave conflicting stories, sometimes blaming his sister Dawn, sometimes claiming supernatural voices. His shifting accounts blurred fact and fiction even further. Later owners reported no paranormal events. Life in the house returned to normal, yet the Amityville story endures. It stands at the crossroads of true crime and the supernatural, a family tragedy that became a ghost story, a haunting that fueled decades of horror films, sequels, and debate. And now, the final case, the one that will leave you speechless.
The horrors of Amityville blurred the line between tragedy and legend. But true evil doesn't need superstition to terrify. In Gainesville, Florida, a drifter's rampage would turn a college town into a waking nightmare. 5 students, 5 brutal murders, and a killer who reminded everyone that some monsters walk among us unseen and unstoppable.
In the fall of 1990, the college town of Gainesville, Florida became a place of terror. 5 students brutally murdered, their bodies staged in horrifying ways. Behind the crimes was a drifter with a dark past, Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper. His killings didn't just haunt Florida, they later inspired one of the most famous horror films ever made. Daniel Harold Rolling was born in 1954 in Shreveport, Louisiana. From the very beginning, his life was marked by violence. His father, James Rolling, was a decorated police officer, stern, abusive, and emotionally cold. Danny was unwanted. James reportedly told him outright he should never have been born. Beatings were common, and nothing Danny did seemed to earn his father's approval. His mother, Claudia, struggled with mental illness, at times leaving the family, only to return to the cycle of abuse. For young Danny, home was a place of fear. As a child, he retreated into fantasy. He drew disturbing pictures of violent scenes. He killed small animals. Teachers noticed his inability to connect with classmates. By his teens, Danny turned to crime, stealing, breaking into homes, and later escalating to armed robberies. He drifted in and out of jail, unable to hold steady work, his life spiraling deeper into violence. In 1989, Rolling's crimes escalated. After a violent argument with his father, Danny shot him, blinding him in one eye and injuring him severely. He fled Louisiana, now a wanted man. On the run, Rolling lived in campsites and wooded areas, breaking into homes for supplies. But something darker was stirring inside him. By the summer of 1990, he had drifted to Gainesville, Florida, a college town filled with thousands of students preparing for the fall semester at the University of Florida. The city seemed safe, but within days, it would be gripped by terror. August 24, 1990. Rolling's first victims were Sonia Larson, 18, and Christina Powell, 17. He broke into their apartment late at night. Sonia was killed upstairs, Christina downstairs. Their bodies were left posed, staged to shock whoever discovered them. August 25, 1990. His next victim was Krista Hoyt, 18. She was raped, stabbed, and decapitated. Her head was placed on a bookshelf, her body grotesquely staged. August 27, 1990. Rolling struck again, murdering Tracy Pauls, 23, and Manny Taboada, 23. Manny fought back, but Rolling overpowered him. Both were killed, and again the bodies posed. In just 4 days, Rolling had killed 5 students. Gainesville was in shock. As news spread, Gainesville descended into panic. Students slept in groups, blocking doors with furniture. Some withdrew from the university. Gun stores sold out of firearms. Police patrols tripled. The investigation uncovered a campsite in the woods. Inside were disturbing recordings of Rolling singing, burglary tools, and evidence linking to the murders. Rolling was already in custody for armed robberies in Ocala. DNA tied him to the Gainesville murders. The Ripper had been caught. At first, Rolling denied everything, but eventually he confessed not just to Gainesville, but also to a Shreveport family murder in 1989. He admitted to hundreds of robberies, blaming it all on a darker alter ego he called Gemini. In 1994, Rolling pled guilty. In court, he stunned spectators by singing a bizarre hymn he had written. he was sentenced to death. Rowling spent 12 years on death row, drawing, writing, and giving interviews. On October 25, 2006, he was executed by lethal injection. His final words, another hymn. Rowling's murders scarred Gainesville forever, but also inspired Scream, 1996. Screenwriter Kevin Williamson based the film's premise on the Gainesville Ripper, blending real horror with fiction. For Gainesville, the wounds never fully healed. Memorials still honor the 5 victims, reminders of lives cut short. In just 4 days, Danny Rowling shattered the peace of Gainesville and left a legacy of fear that stretched far beyond Florida. The Gainesville Ripper became more than a killer. He became a cautionary tale about the monsters who walk among us. His crimes proved that the most terrifying masks are not the ones we see in movies, but the ones hiding in plain sight behind ordinary faces.
These crimes span decades and states, yet a chilling theme unites them. Human suffering and societal pressures can incubate violence in hidden corners. Gein, DeFeo, and Rowling show how neglect, control, and isolation twist ordinary individuals into catalysts for terror. Society watches in horror, fascinated yet powerless to fully understand, raising uncomfortable questions about the environments we create and the monsters they may produce. Evil, it seems, is both a mirror and a warning. The real horror may not be in the crime, but in the human mind that can conceive it. When a home feels haunted, is the terror rooted in the walls or in the pain that once filled them? How much do horror films and media shape real-world crimes, and do these killers consciously or unconsciously mirror what they've seen? I've presented the 3 crimes. Now the jury, that's you, delivers your verdict. The case reopens in the comments. The clock runs out, but the stories don't end. Every case reflects another. Join us again to discover more lives, more secrets, more connected crimes. If you found the stories chilling, hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes.